This is going to be an event that we will weekly schedule in the Discord server. Join if you haven't already. I would like to mention that this is currently being hosted by our wonderful event team.
I'm on 28 hours of sleep because if I fell asleep, I wouldn't be here. The rules will explain themselves when we get into each individual game, but the only thing you need is a phone.
You said it will explain itself, but how do we get in?
We'll see. Create a challenger.
Oh, what the fuck?
A challenger?
You get given another person's drawing, and you have to best match what you think the topic is.
What the fuck?
What the fuck am I supposed to do with this?
And now you vote. The wrist doodle.
The champion of the dark web. The dog is mean. I gotta vote mean.
Is Nice Cat supposed to be Shiroko, bro? She's got like heterochromia or whatever you called.
Yeah, heterochromia.
No. Oh no, my cat.
Your cat should have been mean.
Oh, my money's on Charles.
Yeah, that's who we start.
Yeah.
Okay, I was fucking Charles. Fuck you. I was gonna win that shit.
That all of us lose at least 10 brain cells during this.
Don't on you. I don't have a brain cells.
Listen, you have one, and it's desperately clinging on life.
It is crying out to
You're right.
Lord help. He's
There is
drawing
no
hentai.
Lord here.
He's
Only
drawing
pain.
hentai in class again.
I don't have glasses. I cannot drive. I cannot read in front of me.
My eyesight is not good.
So you're saying if we take your glasses from you, you are helpless.
Yes. I'm like Velma.
He's also like
Now.
Arthur Morgan.
Fuck this shit.
Oh my god, Brock. You just like had his seizure and you're like, yeah, that's
I was gonna
Really?
draw COVID, but then I couldn't think of a name, so I was like, Arthur Morgan. He died. Oh. Sir, can we have a talk? This is why the word was banned.
That is way too detailed of a cat compared to everything else that's been
I know.
like, why is that cat so well drawn?
I'm surprised that no one
But
has
there's
drawn
no
it
face.
yet.
The clips you just saw were from the wonderful event we had in the Discord server. Join down below. We have these pretty much once a week, if not that, then once every 2 weeks. We'll be playing Among Us because I've never played and apparently people think I should. With that being said, let's talk about Arknights. In fact, we're going to talk about a bunch of different gacha games because I had a plan for this video, but the editing software didn't like it, so this is what you're getting. If you just wanted those clips, you feel free to leave. This is just going to be a rant. First off, look, I'm going to start out with Arknights. I mentioned before that Arknights doesn't properly explain a lot of concepts to you, and in other ways, it'll just throw a bunch at you at once to the extent where you won't really need them. Even if you do understand them, you won't need them likely until later on. And what this means is the vast majority of the information that you do learn is useless, and when it is useful, it becomes undermined by a different factor of the game. An example being deployment order. Sure, it's useful, but a lot of times it's probably not going to be useful because you can usually, in the early stages, rely on an enemy going along the path they designated for it. This is fine. You can plan your team accordingly and have them block off the access point that you're trying to protect. However, this becomes a downside when you rely on it too heavily, and now you're faced off with a caster who's just going to sit there. Yeah, they have a path. Yeah, you plan for the path, but it doesn't say how long they're going to stand there, and you don't know their range. So the fact of the matter is you can look at their resistances and their defenses, but you can't look at the range of their attacks. So you're just hoping and praying that, hey, you know what, maybe our healer can keep everybody alive long enough until that person comes forward. Alternatively, you have invisible enemies, unblockable enemies. Each one of these does not necessarily undermine or make your information useless. However, instead, what it ends up doing is making you second guess yourself to an extent where a lot of individuals are likely to ignore what they already know, because it doesn't matter what your deployment order is if your enemies and your team aren't properly reaching the units you want them to. If your opponents are in a range where the only unit they can attack, and they can attack from range, is your casters or is your archers or snipers, or maybe even your medic, then the deployment order that you memorized does not matter because you don't control how far the enemy is going to get to. You plan for their range, you plan for them to walk along a path, but you didn't plan for them to do is stop there for 5 minutes. So you plan around that. You can plan around where enemies are coming from, but you can't plan about half of them being invisible to the extent to where now you have 6 people trapped up and stacked on top of your defender. You have individuals like Horn, who can expose invisible enemies only if she can see them, which completely makes the point of her first ability, her first skill, useless. And look, I'm gonna be honest here, the designs of each character are wonderful. They look pretty nice. Even the E2 art, wonderful. The skins, cool beans, right? I like them, they're cool sometimes. I got Laplands, I'm happy with it. But if you're asking me or asking a lot of individuals to care about the story, don't get get me wrong, the story can be great if it's explained by another person. But if we're comparing multiple different gacha games, look, Arknights doesn't necessarily have that level of storytelling, and this isn't saying the story isn't bad or isn't good. What I'm instead trying to say here is that yes, there's different events, yes, there's different timelines, yes, there's ultras, and there are these different factors. But if I'm looking at how the game presents it to me, look, I don't want to read a text file, and that's what it gives me on each character. Here's a text file, have fun. Yeah, I built up trust. You wanna know what that means? I get to read more text. There is nothing that gets me invested or involved in this character. If I want to read that text, I could just Google it. And that's the difference. There's an incentive in a lot of other games to experience that storyline for yourself, but in Arknights, it's literally a text file. And that feels so lackluster because it doesn't feel like you're building a bond with this character. You're learning more about pre-existing information that realistically they should have been the one to tell you. And if you had these interactions with the character, it would make it so much more impactful. Lavland, for instance, the unit who I've invested the most into, the unit who I bought the skin for, yeah, she's nice, yeah, I like her design, yeah, she looks cool, and she actually does pretty good damage. But I am not going to go through and read that story because I already have, and guess what? I don't care. It is not interesting. Yeah, the events, they can have nice storylines, but let's talk about that because you have units that are specifically locked off to completing certain stages. This means that if you're a newer player, you're very likely to rush the content for the sole purpose of getting to a strong enough point to where you can get that unit before they leave. And for the individuals who are going to say, yeah, you can purchase potentials, yeah, that kind of works, but it kind of doesn't. Because it'd be an entirely different story if you could play the first stage of the event. Let's say hypothetically that's all you can do, the first stage of the event. You could replay that over and over again, get enough of the currency for the event to purchase the potential. Let's say that potential, if you didn't already have the unit, gave you that unit. And later on in the stage when you would get that unit, you would instead just gain a potential for them. That would be fine, but no matter how many potentials you can theoretically get, you still won't have the unit. You have to clear that stage later on. Which means that a lot of people are inclined to bum rush a lot of the content to push to a state in which their account is able to push through the event to get the unit that would theoretically be useful to them. An example, I know some individuals who aren't capable of completing the event enough to get the units like Lumen or to get the Defender from a previous event. And it doesn't feel nice when you're a new player and you're essentially locked out of a portion of content. I'm not saying events should be easy. I'm perfectly fine with the difficulty. But I'm saying if they're going to reward you with a unit and throughout the entirety of the event you can purchase the potentials for that unit, then a unit should be able to also subsequently be bought from the shop, or it should be interchangeable in the event that if you don't have the unit, you buy the potentials, you get the unit. As opposed to you being able to buy the potentials at any point in time, but you still can't get the unit until you clear that stage. It's a small thing, but it means a lot. Because if you want someone to pay attention to the event storyline especially, you need to give them an opportunity to do so, and people don't have the opportunity if they have to force through the stages and brute force and build units they don't really care about and build units they don't really like for the sole reason of clearing the content. And the unit from the previous event was Heavy Rain. That's the one who I was talking about. I just logged into my account to check. But then let's move on from that. You have individuals, and this isn't the whole community, you have individuals who act like a flaw of the game or a downside of the game is instead just increasing difficulty, which makes it a good mechanic. It's not. I'm gonna be honest, it's not. And this isn't for the whole community, this isn't for the whole game. Bad design or unexplained things are not equal to higher difficulty, therefore good content. If a video game is bad, everybody would say, yeah, that's a bad game. You don't look at it and say, well, it's just difficult to play. The developers intended for something to be different about it and you just don't get it. No, it's a bad game. Bad design is bad design. Accept it and move on. And get rid of the weird elitist attitude some people have, because my god is it fucking annoying. But hey, we're leaving Arknights to that, let's move on to
With time to develop in their life.
Blue Archive. Because look, as much as I love this game, my god does it have some issues. First and foremost, what does the formation even mean? Why is this Zuna going into the front when she's an SMG user? And how does she draw more fire than my Tsubaki? There is no control given to the player. Whether you love it or hate it, I think people like having at least some degree of influence over their characters. You are more inclined to take on a unit or a healer that can drag someone away to heal them than you are just to let the game do it yourself and pray. Because a lot of times you're going to have your units in stupid positions. Or, luckily enough, you won't have that. Instead, you'll have AoE effects of your opponents. For instance, during the Wakamo event, you had a stage in which enemies would die, or explode essentially, and fire would be all over the ground. And your team would just stand in it or run through it, and you'd just be sitting there like, can you move? And no, they can't. They can't move. I feel like the game could have some degree of control, or at least a better AI to do it in. Next up, can we talk about how poorly explained some of the game's early concepts are? Like, if you're trying to get into the game as a new player, there is a lot of things that just are not well explained, or they're given like a small text box and you really don't care because half of them just skip over or repeat the same stuff you already know. So then you get to later stages where you actually need to pay attention to stuff, and no, you don't remember a single thing they told you. You don't know the environment, you don't know who's good where, you don't know when there's a stopping point of diminishing returns from upgrading your unique equipment. You might not even know what unique equipment is. The crafting system is pretty bad, let's be honest. It's not like it's just bad, it's more or less tedious. The fact that it takes so long to ascend, I don't mind the wait timer. I don't really give a damn because I can purchase the skip tickets anywhere. It's the fact that I have to go through, I have to click these different things, then I have to individually feed these pieces in. Look, Whatever. Outside of that, even why am I only allowed to have 3 different things being crafted at once? What is the stupid limitation there? Why do I have to complete instantly individually? At least give me a complete all button on the side of that. Just small things to speed it up. Look, you can say Blue Archive is a casual game, but there's still inconsistencies here and there that really feel like they should kind of be shortened down because it just wastes time overall. And look, you know what? The app icon, it looks pretty cool right now. I like it, cool, whatever, sure. But if you're gonna change it from Shiroko to Arona, then I expect everybody else to be given a chance to. Look, just let me change it myself. Let me pick Izuna as the icon. Look, I like Izuna, let me pick her. Everybody would appreciate being able to just pick the character who's the icon. It just makes more sense. Other than that, the game is good. I actually quite like it. Like, it's open on my phone right now just because the main menu theme is a bop. It's real good. Like, the music is great. And that little opening, cool. It's very pretty. Finally, let's get on to Genshin Impact. Look, as much as I play the game, there's a lot of problems with it. Let's be honest here. There's nothing to do. Whether you like endgame content or not, whether you don't care about it, let's be honest. We need at least something to do. A resin extension should have been given at the 2nd anniversary. Not just, hey, let's bump it up by 10. No, let's give you a whole additional 40. Even it out even. Just make it 200. Because now there's so many, we honestly should have had updates to the shop and so many other things from that point onwards. Why is it that I got Yai Miko, but I need to do the entirety of Enkonomiya to even build her up? Why is it that there's no technical exchange from this stuff? If you got Nahida, you have to travel all the way through Sumeru. Actually, no, if you're starting the game, let's say you just played the game, you downloaded cool, you picked up Nahida, now you have to go all the way through Lyra. Then you have to go through Sumeru. Then you have to go through the desert. And then you have to finally fight that boss. Why is the interactive map not in the game? In the teapot, if you're crafting an item, there should be a little tab that shows you what materials you need to make a set like you wanted. Instead, I have to remember. If I'm building up a character, let me pin the items I need and just check them off or gray them out after I have all of them. Vortex Vanquisher, Unforged, Summit Shaper, and a bunch of other weapons really should have been added to the standard banner. If Denari is going to be in there, these others should be as well. Let's be honest, the community's the bad part of the game. Not the worst part of the game. The community's not that bad, but people make it out to be worse than it is. And so, if we're going to talk about that, let's be honest here, guys. People make a big issue out of nothing sometimes. Nobody gives a fuck about Tignari's name. I don't. For everybody else who's saying that these people are black characters, if you're not black, no one cares. If you are black, you probably aren't complaining. I don't really give a shit. I'm black. I can say that. I don't give a fuck. I play the game to have fun, not worry about the diversity quota of the game. Next up, speaking of which, they should honestly just keep the current event time. I like the fact that events are shortened out and banners are shortened up because it makes me feel like there's much more happening in the game itself. It doesn't feel as dead. Characters like Yoimiya and Child were in the world in Inazuma. For the photograph event, keep that. It makes it feel so much more alive. It's fun to just walk around and you see your character like, oh, cool. It's little things. The teapot is such a big thing that I enjoy, but a lot of people don't understand it because they don't use it. Or they don't use it because they don't understand it. A lot of people don't understand team building guides. There's no real differentiation. If we're gonna have the talent recommendation for what you level up, we should have these set bonuses as well. You can see what artifacts he will use and the highest like main stat, whether it's EM or whatever, but you can't see the artifacts there, which I feel like would be really helpful for understanding if you're doing a build right. Artifact loadouts, we need them. I changed one character's artifact set around with another one, and I have to piece them all back together and hope they're in the exact same set. And when I see a slight damage difference, I'm like, wait a minute, is that right? Please give us artifact loadouts. Replayable cutscenes. Let me rewatch some of the older cutscenes in the game. Let me re-experience those story moments, because guess what? I've been playing the game and I took a break. Let's say I took a break for 2 months, 3 months. I want to rewatch the last thing that happened in the story, and I don't want to have to go to YouTube. I want to be able to do it on my own account. And it's great for getting footage. Please let me do that, please. Can we please get a dark mode for the main menu? I don't like being blinded by light when I open up Genshin Impact. And finally, it's super easy to hate on the game and really not enjoy it, but everybody plays it. So obviously some people do feel some attachment to the game. It's not just like, oh, like there's so much potential, there still needs to be done. No, look, you play the game because you like it. Just admit that. It's fine. I do. We all do it. Everybody likes this game enough to continue playing it. Even if you dislike some things, you still enjoy the game overall enough to keep playing it. You're not coming back because you're like, well, there's nothing better to do, because if there really wasn't, you would do something else. And if you're here just because you hate Genshin, fuck off. Let's be honest here. I don't give a shit if you hate Genshin. If you don't play Genshin, shut the fuck up. And if you don't play Genshin and you hate Genshin just because it's Genshin, well, fuck you. But it makes sense. Your opinion is worthless and so are you, so who cares? Either fucking way, it's fucking Thanksgiving. I got shit to do. Fuck you. Leave a like, subscribe. See you next time. Or don't. Fuck off.